with the band. If you hang around that old Viper man, if you should come across a Viper in the night, that's when you get the hit that makes you feel alright. You'll be high and trouble's out of sight, so don't you hang around that Viper in the night. You'll be high. You take one hit and you'll be swinging with the band when you hang around that old Viper man. That old Viper man, and let temptation lead you by your lily hand, you'll be moving your body to the dance when you cut it with that old Viper man. You'll be high. You take one hit and you'll be swinging with the band when you hang around that old Viper man. From that old Viper man, don't you take that fruit he's holding in his hand. Just one bite and you'll be swinging with the band if you hang around that old Viper man. You'll be high.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in the intro montage of this episode, I went ahead and got the interior mostly put back together on the Mark IV. Now, the only really outstanding items at this point in time are to reinstall the filler panels that go around the cage bars where they go through the dash. But all in all, this came out awesome. The reef locking came out nicely. I got the carbon center panel knocked out, all the Haltech bits knocked out and located on there. And if we power up, and as everything kicks on, you can see the IC7 comes to life. You can see the backlighting on the CAN keypad, the backlighting on the window switches. There's the dash design currently. And the addition that I'm the most excited about are the additions rather, are right up on the front of the halo right there. So if I press this cabin button, you can see that I now have dome lights. And I went ahead and I chose these lights as they're low profile and clean and everything else. And I put 4 of them in place. So this thing lights up very brightly in here. And even with all of the shop lights on, you can still see just how bright everything is. So another pretty cool addition that I'm really happy about is the car actually has a key at this point in time. Now, this isn't what actually causes the car to crank, but it acts as kind of a main power switch in the cabin here. It isn't a kill switch per se, but now I have an actual removable portion of this electrical circuit. So that way, if I take this car, or when I take this car out to any events or anything like that, I don't have to worry about people taking it, provided that I have the key in my pocket. So it functions like a normal car that way. But with the interior pretty well squared away on this car, like I said, it's now time to begin on the next big project on it. And as you guys saw in an episode or two ago, I made the fixture plate for the new intake manifold. And since then, some materials for the new intake manifold have arrived. So right here on the table, we have the first portion of the new intake manifold materials. And these are all from Ross Machine Racing, as you guys can see right there. And since I just had that in my hand, this is the new throttle body. This is a Ross Machine Racing 90mm throttle body. I've used these throttle bodies before, and one of their smaller throttle bodies is actually what's on the SC at this point in time. I really like their products. They make really, really nice throttle bodies, and I'm excited to have one of these on the car again. And I had one years ago on that car, and I think I sold it off with the intake manifold that I built for it at that point in time. But now we are back to an RMR 90mm, and that makes me very happy. So they've since changed the designs a little bit on these, and they are a modular throttle body at this point in time. The 4-inch hose connection that you see, that I'm kind of holding it by right now, if you see those two bolts or bolt ends right there, as well as those two, you can actually remove the inlet portions of the throttle body. And they have a few different options, and I opted for this 4-inch hose connection as I'm going to be modifying this. And I'll take it off. You can see the 4 stainless bolt heads down in their recesses right there. But I'll be removing this and welding a 4-inch Wiggins flange onto it so I can continue to use my Wiggins connections that I spent a ton of money on and don't just want to throw in a box and forget about. Beyond the throttle body, we also have a throttle body flange. You can see the beautiful tooling marks on this. And this is specifically designed for their 90mm throttle body. You can see on the inside, really nice radius in through here. The pre-drilled and pre-tapped fastener holes to hold the throttle body onto it are a nice touch. And this will be a really nice piece, and it will save me probably a day's worth of work hand making a throttle body flange that wouldn't be nearly as nice as what they are able to make. I have 6 of their velocity stacks, and these are specifically designed for the oval tubing that we'll go over in a moment. But these, again, are a really nice radius, or they have really nice radii associated with them. Little flats on the sides right here in case you have to set them right next to each other. And they have a nice counter bore on this side that will receive the oval tubing very nicely. And these are a really nice touch if you're building an intake manifold, and a really nice thing to include. And last but not least, we have their oval runner tubing. You can see this has a decent wall thickness to it, has a nice oval shape, and this pretty closely mimics the port shape on the intake side of any 2JZ head. So anytime that you can avoid reshaping or altering the shape drastically of the conduit that you're flowing into or out of the head, well, you're going to have a happier, the flow of exhaust or air, or I guess the flow of fluid, will be much happier not having to change shape and everything very drastically and abruptly. So I've used, again, this tubing before. It works out very, very nicely. It welds nicely. And what we are going to start with is making the runner sections. So making runners for an intake manifold ends up being much easier than building primaries on a header or a turbo manifold. As you can see on the old intake manifold right here, and I should note that this oval tubing and these velocity stacks are Ross Machine Racing products that I used on this manifold as well. But you can see that this is simply a copy and paste 6 times deal to build the runners and get them attached to the flange. So what I'm going to do is measure if there is any difference and or discrepancy between the actual heights of these two head flanges. And just looking at it very briefly right here, it definitely appears as though there is. You can see that this flange right here is much narrower, shallower. It's a shorter flange than this new Autosports Engineering flange. And that is not a bad thing, but it will require me to kind of alter the length and alter the overall height of these runners, as I'd like to keep kind of this section underneath of the plenum floor plate the same length, as I know that it fits in the engine bay of the car pretty nicely. So let me go ahead and take a few measurements, get all of this squared away, and then we can make some cuts, do some welds, and get these runner sections knocked out. Well, the runners and the velocity stacks are welded together, and I'm very happy with the way that this has came out so far. So I altered the way that I welded these compared to the old Manifold, and the welds are much cleaner and tidier, and I'm much happier with the end result. So now that these 6 are all squared away and all welded up, I'm going to shift my focus to getting the throttle body ready to go. And that necessitates modifying the hose connection that bolts onto the throttle body by welding this Wiggins flange or Wiggins ferrule to it. So I need to take the anodizing off of this adapter, and I'm also going to sand it down a little bit to take the ridge that you can see right there where my thumb is. I'm going to take that off, as I don't need to have provisioning for a silicone coupler if I'm not going to use silicone couplers. And if I take that piece off, or sand this portion down, then it will make for a cleaner and tidier weld, and everything will be good to go. So let me go ahead and get that prepped, and then we can knock that weld out as well. This will be squared away, or the throttle body will be squared away rather, and that'll be one more thing checked off of the list for this whole intake manifold build and intake side refresh and refurb. we now need to do some modifications to the head flange. And I have what we're going to be doing marked out on the head flange right now. And if I take this section of extra oval tubing and place it over top of one of the ports, you can see that there is a little bit of overhang from the flange, or with the flange compared to this oval runner tubing. So rather than having a little bit of a shelf or a wall that incoming air is going to hit and become turbulent and everything else, I'm going to take my router right here with a chamfer bit on it, and I'm going to knock out these sections that you can see are marked with the marker on each one of the ports. That will make a smoother transition, and it will make everything happier. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make a big aluminum chip mess and get this squared away, so that way the head flange is ready to accept the runners and will be one step closer to this intake manifold build being completed. The head flange is now modified to properly receive this oval tubing. And I went ahead and I used my chamfer bit and initially chamfered all 6 of the ports. And from there I came in with some flap discs and cartridge rolls and things like that. And the end result is, if you guys can see, some really nice transitions from the oval runner tubing to the actual head flange. So at this point in time, what I need to do is to craft the Plenum floor plate. That will allow me to properly locate each of the 6 runners and make sure that I get everything lined up the way that it needs to be. To do so, I'm going to use this right here, which my friend Seth over at Sleeper Designs was kind enough to send to me years ago when I made the initial manifold, the one that we're basing all of this build off of. And this gives me the spacing in between each of the center lines of the ports, as well as from one far port to the other far port. And this will allow me to transfer these dimensions over to this piece of aluminum right here. And then I can go ahead and drill all of my holes and get all of this ready to be assembled. And if everything works out appropriately in the way that it should, then I'll have 6 3-inch holes placed along this sheet to these dimensions, and that will all correspond and line up with where the ports are at on this head flange. So hopefully it works out the way that I'm hoping that it will. If not, then I will have to manually align each of the 6 runners onto this flange, and then transfer those locations over to another piece of aluminum, which I have some extra that I bought just in case I mess this up. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and do some drafting, some drilling, so on and so forth, and get this all ready to test fit and mock up and make sure that we are good to go before we proceed on with this build any farther. Well, I made the first version of the new Plenum floor plate, and it didn't come out exactly as I wanted it to. So things fit not the best. And I transferred the geometry over from that drawing like I showed earlier, and maybe it's it's more than likely on me for not getting things as accurate as they need to be. But if you look and see, this runner doesn't quite line up, nor does that one. And none of them quite line up on the ports the way that they need to. Now, I could probably bore the holes out a little bit more on the floor plate to get them to sit exactly where I want them to, but that isn't exactly the best way to do it. So this is why I bought extra materials. And what I'll do at this point is take this floor plate and throw it over in my aluminum stash to make other brackets and things like that in the future. But as far as the floor plate is concerned, I'll need to tack all of the runners to the head flange, then pull the head flange off of the fixture plate and transfer over the centers of each one of the ports that way. I think that will be the best way to make this happen and to make everything fit the way that it needs to. So kind of unfortunate that I just put the time and the effort and everything into making this floor plate that does fit the velocity stacks quite nicely, but that doesn't really matter all that much if it doesn't fit the head flange as it needs to. So lesson learned, and it's just onward and upward from here. It's not the end of the world, and let's go ahead and get this knocked out the correct way. There we go. The second attempt at the Plenum floor plate came out very nicely. Everything fits fairly well, not perfectly, but we are not in the stage of this build where perfect fitment is necessary right this moment. So the lack of perfection, if you see the runner that's in the center of the frame right now and see how it fits with a little bit of a gap to the bottom of the Plenum floor plate, doesn't fit exactly perfectly, and if you guys saw, I had to use a little bit of persuasion to get this all to sink into place. Again, that will change when it comes time to actually weld this all together, as I'll still need to break all of the runners off of the head flange and take them out of the Plenum floor plate to install the direct port nitrous bungs into them. I don't have those on hand right this moment, but once they do come in, we can go ahead, drill, and weld and do all of that to get those put where they need to be as well. But for right now, I'm very happy with the way that this is coming together. And if you see, I marked F for front, there is an R there for rear, as this is a one-directional Plenum floor plate, or at least I'm assuming that it is. And I didn't want to have to chase my tail around and flip and rotate and everything else. So now these are clearly marked, and I can put this back in the same position, same place every single time. So this whole thing is coming together pretty nicely. I'm happy with what I see so far, and I may trim down some on these edges before everything goes together, but I need to wait until my Plenum tubing arrives so I can actually craft the shape of the Plenum and not back myself into a corner and have to make this floor plate a third time. Making it twice was enough, and we'll just run with what we have right now. With the Plenum floor plate now at least roughed in for the Mark IV's new intake manifold, I think this is a good place to leave off for this episode. So all of the other outstanding materials are now ordered. The tubing to build the Plenum, the burst panel, that whole assembly, the nitrous bungs, so on and so forth. There are a number of other components that are and will be involved with the remainder of this intake manifold build. But to see all of those become part of this entire assembly, we'll have to wait for next week for that. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all of these different journeys and all of these different adventures with me. This intake manifold build is something that I've been meaning to take on, meaning to address for quite a while, and I could not be happier that at this current moment, we are the majority of the way through all of the difficult stuff for it. So the rest of it will come together very nicely, and I'm going to do my absolute best to try to make this as nice of a manifold aesthetically and everything else as I possibly can. The aesthetics are one of the big things that drove me crazy with the old manifold, and to anybody else it may look okay, but I know that I can do better than what this thing is, and that is the whole goal with this one. So I hope that you guys are looking forward to the remainder of the intake manifold build and getting this thing wrapped up the rest of the way, ready to go back on the dyno, and ready to make some hits in this upcoming 2025 season. So with all of that being said, before I drone on forever, that'll be about the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my MCB collection. I have a number of different apparel items and accessories available, all in a really cool multicam black colorway that I hope you guys like. And if you do like the stuff there, please feel free to pick anything up off or out of that collection or any of my other merch or product offerings. And if nothing does speak to you, well, hopefully I offer something in the future that does. With all of that being said, that'll be about the end of this one, and I will see you guys in the next episode.